What's up, everybody? Welcome to Thursday. Welcome to the Flipside Streamcast Live. As always, second week of the month, and Dale and I are getting on the lines. And we're going to go battle it out. He has a bigger mane than I do. I can't grow something like that, but that's okay. Nonetheless, I'm feisty and we'll fight back. So, what's going on, my friend? Good morning.
Yeah, man. I have a lot of good things going on in real time. Those watching live, I got to sync up with a couple of Lions Guide favorites yesterday. JT Frank hosts the Consequence of Habit podcast, and Jeff Harris, who's freaking, I talk high performance. Jeff is like an ultra performer, man. That dude's just a maniac in what he does. And so I aspire up to, as far as like, man, he just like right now we're doing like the month of Murphs. Like you're supposed to do like half a Murph a month. Of course, Jeff is doing like a full Murph every day, wearing his weight. I mean, he's the man, dude. So I'm trying to work my way up to keep up with that dude.
I'm trying to keep my back pain, under control is what I'm trying to do. So that's good. That's good to know. But no, yeah. Well, cool. Well, listen, to our viewers, to everybody else there, we got a good show today. We, as always, and the ground rules for the Lions Den, we'll give them to you. Listen, Dale and I talked about it for 10 minutes beforehand. Today was actually only 5 minutes that we're going to bring something in. It's actually one, though, that we've been wanting to bring in for a little bit of time. So we have a little bit of maybe pre-hand knowledge to it, but it's a good one. It's something that we talk around a lot, and it involves and it will permeate itself, at least the starting subject will. It permeates itself into all facets of leadership, all facets of high performance. And that's ego. We want to talk about ego today, in the good, the bad, and the toxic forms of it, because we think that it has all three different types of forms, I think. At least that's my opinion about it. So let's start off with that. Let's talk about ego and leadership and kind of where it leads to. And I'm gonna start with this so we form a good baseline. Merriam-Webster defines ego as the self, especially as contrasted to another self or the world. So what does that mean? Well, I'll let you make your own interpretation, but we all, I think, know what ego is. I think it's that, they talk about, can you even get in an elevator because your ego is so big? Is there enough room for everybody else, right? And we see it a lot. I think I'm going to make an argument, Dale, to start off, that I think we see it less and in different forms. It's not as blatant, I would argue, that it used to be, where we used to have very much tiered classes, because I think there's a little bit more sharing in the world and openness in the world, I think, than there has been. But nonetheless, there definitely still is. I think it's actually maybe disguised, actually more. Ego's disguised more than it's ever been before, which I think can be almost worse, right? Because if it's not on the surface and it's not about transparency, then it ends up being more toxic in some ways. So what you thinking?
I like how you said that, right? It's disguised more. That's been a topic of late, and if anyone's kind of been like looking forward to me on social media, like I've dialed it way back, because I've just kind of gone like, I called it this morning, kind of like social media fasting, or really phone fasting, because I like tossed my phone away, and I'm in my fourth week of just intentionally being away from it. And anyways, one of the things I've been working on is, okay, well, but what's the dichotomy here, right? What is the right amount of social media, to be intentional? Because what I don't want to be, I don't want to be like out there like, whoa, look at me. And I know this is kind of like, I know where I'm at, and I know where I'm saying this, right? Like I'm trying to build this platform to go help, empower life. What we just got, like
everyday leaders.
Yeah. I want to go help empower everyday leaders, right, through this platform. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, right? Because I'm like, well, I don't want to partake in the toxicity of social media, but I want to go help empower everyday leaders, right? So I'm trying to go, wow, I love keeping this daggone phone away from me. But I got a mission to uphold, right? I got to go out here and help build a team, build a platform to empower leaders, and I'm going to need to use technology to do that, of course. So, but some of the reasons I have not been as active is because, I don't want to post content for the sake of content. I want to be way more intentional to bring the value. So I've been just kind of dialed back because I want to get more intentional in that. And as I'm like receiving the benefits of not being on there, it's given me some opportunity to reflect on it more, and go, hey, how do I don't want to make it about me. And you've heard me say that a million times. Everyone's heard me say that. Like, I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about the lessons, the insights, the things that people can, that empower the everyday leader. So there's the ego. So I think, what was the word you used? You used a word.
For what? I use lots of words.
Disguised. Right. Yeah, disguised.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down because I think that's a really good, and that's what I was saying. Like, I also am ego aware. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. Awesome book. It was one of the great experiences. Like, I was reading that book, and I caught myself like mentally like challenging the book. Like, as I'm reading it, I'm like pushing back, and I was go, holy crap, like that's my ego talking, like with and that was a good kind of level up for me to kind of be more consciously aware of my own ego and so on. So but I like what you use, that word disguising it, because I think you're 100%, man. Like, social media and whatever, like, it can be, I won't say everyone, but it can be like a disguise for, putting your ego out there. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think it's, look,
so
here, we'll get really personal today. I was an only child growing up, right? And so all eyes on me. I was an only adopted child, only one on one side of the family as well. So it was aunts, grandma, grandpa. I was it, right? And so grew up, and I knew I loved the attention as I grew older. In fact, it took me, they used to, at Whidbey Island, they were like, who wants to do the static display? And you would end up, kids would ask you to sign an autograph on your thing. And I'm like an E5, 20, I don't know, 26 years old. It's like, oh, this is so cool. I'm in my orange flight suit and stuff. And I think as I grew older, I realized that it wasn't, that's not what I necessarily wanted, right? So the attention was part of the whole thing, which I think there's a new, I have to promote Laura Colbert next week, but we're going to talk about leading generations. And there's different generations about what it is. And I think we used to think, I think this generation that we're now, these Gen Zs are actually not about attention. I think it's more about sharing. They're more about sharing and being more open with themselves. And it doesn't necessarily, and I've fell into this with my daughter a few times. When I did it, it was about attention because I had always had it as a younger person, right? And so, but for her, I'm realizing that it doesn't work in the same way, right? So let's backtrack though to leadership and ego and leadership. And let's frame it in a couple of ways, if you're okay with that. Let's frame it, and we'll keep it simple: the good, the bad, the toxic, right? So let's go reverse. So toxic ego, I want to say that's the one that's disguised and you don't see it as much, right? You used to see the whole, like, I'm a this, I drive a this is what I have, I'm better than you, right? And I don't feel like that's so prominent as what it used to be. And I'll just use like post 80s, where it used to be like that, where you're getting that.
You don't think so? In this age of materialism, and
I think people are trying to be, I think people like that at least try to be more relatable than they've ever had before. Let me give it to you that way.
Are you saying we're more aware of it, like that game?
Yeah, I think they're more self-aware that they have that, and they try to be a little bit more receptive to. So I live outside Kansas City, and literally, like, there's houses near us, and we do not live in a $1 million house by any means, but there are $1 million homes just right here. And And I'm not saying those. So let me also make clear too. I'm not saying that people who make a lot of money and have done well, right? I'm not saying that they have egos, and I'm not saying anybody can have an
Some
ego.
of them are the most humble people
Right.
you'll ever meet.
Absolutely,
You know?
100%, right? And I shouldn't characterize just because you have money that falls into that, because you know what, you could be, and we've talked about this before too. You could be the manager of a night shift and you have an ego because you're just in that power position, right? And it always goes back to my spam thing, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point. So, but that toxic ego from whoever, doesn't matter, is that one that really just reeks of I'm better than you, period. And I know I'm better than you. Whether that's I'm a class of person, whether that's got racial undertones to it, whether it's got leadership undertones to it, whether it's got monetary undertones to it, doesn't matter. Like that one that comes out is very blatant. I reference it like when you have those instances of toxic leadership that are intolerable and you don't get a second chance to do anything, right? Like a sexual harassment thing, uncalled for. There is no second chance for you. There's a zero defect on that. That toxicity of ego that you get to that where you're like, there's no reason for you to be like that.
Well,
Zero,
and there's those egos are the ones that are never wrong, right? They're the ones that are always right. Everyone else is wrong. You know, as an example. They're more closed-minded, you know. Go ahead.
No, you're totally right. I would use athletes for an example, but why I don't use that is because there's always, and you know me, there's shoes that I've never walked in. And there are specific things that happen with when you're in those instances of whether you have a lot of money, whether you made a lot of money and worked hard to get it, whether you're an athlete and you got fame and fortune that way. There are things that you and I will probably never understand and don't want to be in those positions where you have to be a little bit more cold than you normally would. I'm going to give you a great example. This is a really great example that I thought was, at first I was like, seriously? Like that's how you came about it? But when I look back on it and when I found out the truth, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. So my daughter was being mentored by a world-class goalkeeper up in Maryland. We were there, and she happened to be would take the time and she would work with Peyton. And her teammate from college had posted something on Twitter and was complaining about someone who. So this player was complaining about a fan who basically called her out for not even considering giving up her cleats to them, right? Which is, and you see the NFLs do it all the time. Like, here's my cleats, dude. They walk off the practice field, right? And her point was, she's like, dude, I don't make that much money. Like, I don't make that much money that I could just give my cleats away like that. Like, I need a new pair of cleats. And you would think, dude, we can make cleats. And then you realize that they're making a league minimum of $35,000 a year. And you're like, no shit that they're not going to give their cleats up for it. And when I talked to her teammate and she's like, that's not ego. Like, she's not trying to be an ass. She's just, that's a fact of life. But everything surrounding it is you're a professional athlete. That's just should come. Everybody, it's a trickle-down effect, right? Everybody's like, oh, you all make billions of dollars and get shoes all the time, you know? And but it's not. So I always look at toxic ego and I always kind of look back at it and I say to myself, I'm not in those shoes as well. And I may never be. So I don't want to always just, right? It's not always a negative until you understand it and get it, you know?
Well, yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, but I think one of the word that wasn't said in that example is just the no of assumptions, right? Like that fan was making an assumption that you're a pro soccer player, so you got a bunch of money, so you should be able to give me your shoes. So that's, you know, the ego topic aside, but that's the curse of assumptions right there. Like, correct. You want to look like an ass, make a bunch of assumptions like that, and see where that gets you in life. You know, it's and that's just one of my tenets in teaching clarity, right? Is don't make assumptions, right?
Right.
If you just make assumptions, you don't know if it's true or not. But if you act on that and it is a half truth, you know, falsity or whatever, like there you are, and you're gonna
Right.
land where you are.
And it's not, listen, like we're all fallible. Like we're all, I mean, it happens. Like we all just assume different things all the time, right? I mean, I just, the first.
But that comes to like self-awareness of a leader
Sure.
to from anyone, right?
And I think that's a great thing when you as a leader, when you see ego happening, right? Not only yourself, so trying to check yourself, because listen, our heads can get inflated. I have no problem telling you, like everybody gets inflated. And for some reasons, we were living in a day and age now where people want to be empowered. Talk about like body empowerment is one thing that I look at. Like we watched Saturday Night Live with our kids, and Lizzo was on the other day, and she's very, I mean, whether you know or you don't, she's a bigger star, but she has no problem with it. And so in those senses, like I like that people are being outside with the traditional norms of people saying that you're supposed to be, and just saying, okay, I'm confident, right? This is where this borderlines of, we talk about ego, and you talk about cockiness, and we talk about confidence, and we talk about self, those types of stuff. I think that's a great differentiator to say, okay, you need to look at all of them, and whether it's someone's ego who is overinflated for good reason, for not good reasons. Because listen, I'm going to tell you this is my opinion. I think if you're successful with something, like there's a little bit, and this goes into the good ego, there's a little bit of saying, I'm proud of it. I worked my ass off for it. I've done it. And I should be, a little bit, proud of it, and even promoting it, right? And that can come across, I think, sometimes as having a big ego about it. I think we're, and again, it's perspective. We're going to talk about this a lot, about perspective of ego, of you could look at someone and go, well, they're just trying to give back because they're trying to make themselves look good because they have X, Y, and Z. Well, that's, you said it yourself. Like, just because you have a lot of money, most people who have a lot of money work their asses off for that money. Like if you look at it, like they really did. It wasn't not always just handed to them on a silver platter, and to sustain those amounts also takes hard work. Let's be realistic about that, right? And so like everybody else, if I'm trying to sustain a high middle class, if I'm trying to sustain, those are all hard works in their own rights of doing stuff. It's not like there's a different level of effort on some of those things to sustain something. Like if you don't want to sustain work, don't do it. It's real simple, right? So those things are kind of tied as we go through this all. So I want to bring up if you're good, I want to bring up one of my favorite quotes from Powell. And it's one of his 13 principles. And this is directly, I think, where we start to make the turn over what ego is, and then starting to make the turn to make sure that it's in check, right? And so that's avoid having your ego so close to your position that when your position falls, your ego goes with it.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely impactful to say you can be at the top, and when you're not, do you expect it anymore? We used to make the thing all the time that said, what I didn't want to be was, I didn't want to be at the VFW, and no offense to VFWs. Let me make it clear right now. I didn't want to be the VFW flipping my coin around saying, yeah, what were you? Oh, you're not, you owe me a beer. Like, just like it doesn't work like that. Nobody gives a shit afterwards anyways about what you were, what you did. It was right. So I think that's important, because when you're and here's the key for me. You got to be able to start back on a different. So you'll like this one. When you made E6 in the Navy, when you made E7 in the Navy, they were all happy. They were excited to get a new uniform. They were excited to wear the anchor for the first time. They got rid of the crow on their collar, right? It's kind of, how it was back there when you got your blood stripe and you didn't have your blood stripe in the Marines.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. All you did was you jumped from one shit pile to another shit pile. And by the way,
as you keep dropping shits, like I'm looking to see, because someone posted in the comments here, they were blasting across their facility. So I just want to know whose facility you're you're smashing here today before LinkedIn shuts
Okay.
us down.
Well,
Let's see.
don't shut us down.
So my man Jay-Z. So yeah,
Oh,
Jay-Z.
he's
Thank
good.
you, sir.
He's
See, now you're
handsome.
just peppering
It's
his
all good.
office with all kinds of
I
profanity.
am, but he knows he knows where we're coming from. So you're going from one garbage pile, right? But the one that you're on the top of, you're on the top of the garbage pile, and then when you move up to the next one, and this is in any organization, you're on the new garbage pile. But guess what? You're not at the top of the garbage pile. You're back at the bottom of the garbage pile. So whether it's tiered as in schools and teachers wise, and they get, tiered up or whatever, like you're always going to be back there. So you got to be able to, and there's a new article I want to read about, and they were talking about followership. And that's a hard thing to remember. Like, again, when I was going through, you felt good. They're like, oh, look, this is an air crewman of the year. This is a sailor of the year. And other people were the same ways. And they said, look, that's not, and this was one of the best parts about our leadership experience and our leadership initiation process was they picked out and said, what do you need? Right? They didn't ask you. They were assessing it for you and saying, what does this person need? And I will tell you, a lot of leaders, when they move up, need to learn how to follow again because their egos go, I'm a leader. Well, great, but you need to know how to follow again because you're in a different position to learn again. And I think when you talk about ego, just because you move to another place, and good leaders, I will tell you, I've seen some good leaders that go, I don't know everything, and they can instantly squash their ego of being someplace, right? Because you get assumed, I think we assume as subordinates, we assume somebody should know everything just because they're there. And that's not always the case. And I think you could squash ego problems very quickly if you are transparent and say, I don't know it all. I need your help. What can I build, right? The president has his own cabinet. He doesn't know it all. He has experts in his field that he puts in a cabinet to be able to help him make decisions and whatever. Does he have the ultimate say? Yes. Is it extreme ownership? Absolutely. But you avoid the ego thing when you're in that room and you go, I don't know it all. I need your help. And this is what I need to know. You have a perspective, right? You have an idea as a leader, but as long as you don't go, I know everything. I know what it is. And thanks for your advice, but I know better. That's where your ego comes into play, where you get squashed and then people just stop. Right? Like they just stop talking to you. They stop.
Well, they don't want to waste the energy.
Right.
They don't want to, they fear rejection. Like we naturally fear rejection, right? So if you're in a room with someone who's in charge and they're full of ego and you might have great ideas, but you don't want to put it out there when you know you're going to get shot in the head in front of the whole, boardroom, I one of the things I wrote down earlier kind of in this line was that confidence versus cockiness is defined on how we treat others.
Absolutely.
Right. That's going to be this part of our ego because, like you were talking about, like, having accomplishments and, because there's a balance of the toxic ego to our humility. And there needs to be a balance there. I certainly learned a lesson of trying to be too humble. Yep. I'm the idiot in the room, and devaluing myself. So being too humble, will cost you. You've got to, when you know what's right is right, you got to stand up for what's right or what or whatever, and not always defer, so you can be too humble, just like you can be too egotistical. And the way I've kind of seen that play out now is where, I want to be win-win minded, right? So to your point about the president and the cabinet as an example, what you're describing is the best scenario is they're looking for the win-win. Everyone in the room is contributing. Everyone who's got good ideas are given the opportunity to present it. The leader in charge is open-minded to receive them, but in the context of being ultimately responsible, right? So doing the right amount of diligence, as an example, to just not take whatever's thrown at them and say, yeah, that sounds good. Great. Because ultimately that leader is accountable to the results, right? Versus the win-lose, which is what you described. I win, you lose. Versus the lose-win, where someone is so humble that they're always willing to lose for someone else to win, right? And that's the, for folks out there in business, what's the lose win? The lose win is when your clients walk all over you. You don't say no. There's no standards. And that's the lose win. That's the side when you're so humble that you live a life of chaos because you're a people pleaser. You're just not willing to say no or say, hey, sorry, we don't do it that way or whatever. And so there is a dichotomy here that, the leader has to, have confidence without cockiness, and also not be the sacrificial lamb to everyone else.
Yeah, because
humility.
And I wrote down when to be cocky and confident, right? I think there are 1,000% reasons that there are situations that I want someone to be. Actually, I'll go as far to say cocky, right? I want someone to be that person that needs that swagger to be in certain jobs. Whatever that is, right? Like, I want that to happen at some times, right? And to me, they revolve around sometimes extreme jobs that are like, man, I want somebody to be like that. At the same
cocky
time,
or confident though?
No, I'm going to go as far as to say cocky. I'm going to put that out there.
Even so, are we getting off that? What I was saying, like confidence versus cocky is how you treat other people.
Yes. And I don't want to give an example of it, but I want you to know that I feel like there is a line that sometimes needs to be that way, that I'm actually okay with someone doing that. And I'm going to just say extreme jobs to me, I'm okay with them, with groups of people who do that extreme job sometimes being that way, where they have to be on their own. They have to be almost segregated to do those type of jobs because the mentality and the risk is so high. Let me just put it out that way, that I'm this is a personal statement. I'm okay with that. But they're on their own of what they need to be. And I think, because the risk is so great, I accept that that's fine and that's part of it. But what I've seen is as that same group gets older, and there are more things that are I want to say more important, that you start to see, then I want to see them to be as confident as they can be. So then so it's okay for me for them to start out like that and then realize it, because I think. So let me put this. Let me put it in another perspective. I think, to me, there are jobs where you can start off being cocky, and people would actually accept it a little bit, knowing that you have to grow in and mature to the job to be confident, right? So
cocky.
I'm gonna put that out there, dude. I'm just gonna say that.
Cocky.
Yes, I'm okay with it. I'm personally okay with that. This is what the Lion Den's all about.
I'm trying to define the scenario where you want cocky.
You want me to tell you? You want me to tell you?
Confidence.
You want me to tell you?
Because I hear what you're saying. I just wouldn't apply the word cocky to it. Like, I would want the confident guy for the right reasons to come in these tough jobs. But
let me put it to you this way too. Usually there is someone.
Are you going to call me cocky? Is that what you want to do?
No, not at all. Not at all. Usually there is someone who has reached the confidence portion of the job, leading the people who are cocky. Let me put it to you that way. From my experiences, right? So we have there, and this is all over the place. We have people in the world that. All right, I'm not gonna give you the job.
I don't think because if you're saying the dude the leader that leads cocky people needs to be cocky to win, I'm
hear me out. Just hear me out.
Okay, all right.
Hear me out. There are jobs in this world. There are sports things in this world that you would say you need a screw loose to do that. Okay. Like people said all the time, they're like, you jumping out of perfectly good aircraft. Like you have a screw loose in your head. They say it about goalkeepers. Like, why would you want to get shot at? Right. That's not, there's a screw loose in people's head. They say it in a good way, but we're talking about that these people have mindsets to do different things. There's what's his name? Andrew. Oh my God, I can't remember his name. The rock climber who did free solo. He free soloed all the way up El Capitan on his own.
Andrew Roy? Is it Roy?
I can't remember his name. I want to say it's Seafried or whatever. I can look it up. But great. There's a great book about it, or a great documentary about it. I saw a second. So listen, he did a CAT scan where they showed him disturbing photos, and they were watching his brain at the time they were doing it, right? And they were like, he doesn't react to like gore and horrors, and what they were showing. I mean, it was scientific kind of what they were doing, but they were showing that. So there's something that wasn't right. Like it's like that. And listen, the military, 1000%. You go to military boot camp, Marine Corps boot camp, and you know this. What are they training you to do? They're training you to kill, period, right? Like we started that after after World War II, when we found that only, and this is a true statement, 24% of people actually aimed their rifles in World War II. That's an insane number. Like, to me, that was insane, because they didn't really want to kill. They weren't programmed to do that. And they systematically changed boot camps after that for Korea and Vietnam and everything else to change that, right? On Killing, Colonel Grossman, great book about that, which is
but I'm still hearing psychology, mindset.
Yeah, well, it is.
I'm still wondering where cocky is. Okay,
hear me out.
Okay.
There's a screw loose to do some jobs. I think when you start those jobs and you can do it successfully, I think cockiness comes into play, because you haven't learned of what. Like, you have to grow into confidence into some of those jobs, if that makes sense, right? Like, as we grow as leaders, you start off thinking it's all whatever, right? So here's the example. And this wasn't the full example that I meant. When rescue swimmers came to rescue swimmer school, they thought yelling was cool to do. And I fell into the same thing.
What do you mean? Yelling at
the students, right? Right? And I knife hand the shit out of people. Sorry, I dropped it again. Right? And we used to knife hand right? But here's the thing. After week 2, if I was knife handing somebody, or I was yelling at them, what you learned, and I learned it because I'd been there long enough to know, I learned that I wasn't doing my job, right? Like, I was not instructing them correctly to do. And you saw older instructors who in the beginning thought it was a power play. It was something like that. They were what I would consider cocky about being in the position. What I found later is once they were confident, they knew there were times to use that and times not to use that, right? Mm-hmm. So I was okay knowing they were building their they were elevating themselves and growing out of their cockiness into their confidence, right? So does that make sense?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, from the perspective of, I tell people often as an example, like me, fresh out of the Marine Corps, running into some of my first gigs in the civilian world, which were like government contract jobs where I'm working, federal government employee type folks. I came in
cocky,
wearing my chevrons,
right.
all but. And so and you're saying it's a part of sometimes part of the growth path of, they haven't learned the leadership lessons to kind of contain that, right?
Right. So if you looked at that, because here's the thing, do we accept mistakes from junior people?
Mm-hmm.
We do, right? I'll look at cockiness and say it's a junior mistake, but it's one of those things that you grow into, and this is just my view, you grow into and out of, right? So I want you to have that swagger. I want you to be there. But if you're still there and you haven't grown out of it, when I need you to be grown out of it, because you haven't learned those lessons, either I haven't done the right thing or not. If I have a cocky old person, right, or someone who's senior, they haven't, that's unacceptable to me.
Sure.
Right? That part is unacceptable. I accept it at lower levels, like we accept mistakes, like we accept immaturity. Cockiness is an immature thing, but sometimes I want you to be on that path. Like, I'm okay with you being on that path, But when I need you to be out of it because I'm going to give you the lessons to get out of that and form confidence. Because, would you ever want to sit in front of a leader who wasn't confident? No. Like,
Sure.
we want that from our people.
I'm
We
still,
don't want a cocky leader.
I'm still sticking with confidence versus cocky.
That's fine.
And what I'm hearing you say is you can expect to see it, like what you said earlier. An example I thought of, like it's from my world of the Marine Corps. When we come out of boot camp, man, we're walking around the streets,
right,
cocky, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the minute we go back to combat training, we're knocked back into our place. So
correct.
That's what I'm hearing you say, is that.
But now look at your sergeants coming out.
And we talk like seniors in high school, because we're at that time of the year where they're seniors and they're starting to graduate, or whatever. They're probably walking around the school a bit cocky.
Right.
But this summer, when they got no income or when they show up as a freshman in campus, they're going to get slapped back down.
Humbleness, right?
Yeah.
Here's your pie. It's been baked for you. It's a big one, right? And I think we go through these all the time in life, right? You get to the point where you're like, hey, what? And here's the thing. when you add things, so my point is, and I think you just added a little bit. You knew you were cocky coming out of boot camp. It made you like that on purpose. And if you didn't have that in some form or fashion, now granted, some people were coming out that were introverted, that weren't showing cockiness. Did they feel it inside? Maybe. Absolutely, maybe. Maybe they didn't wear it on their sleeves. Maybe they didn't.
Well, there's pride, right? So back
absolutely,
to your pride.
100%. Yeah. And I think a cocky person, dude, look what I did. I finished boot camp. What is? I mean, right? So there's a little bit of all.
Maybe cockiness is the toxic display of pride, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, right? Yeah. And again, I think, put a percentage on it, whatever you want. You want to be, that the expectation is going to get there, that they're going to bring people towards cockiness. And that's fine. As long as you know that maturity later on is going to change that, and they're going to dull it down into not being cocky and to be other things, right? And jobs will do this too. If you're doing selfless jobs where you're just working for people, you can be the best freaking nurse, the best doctor, what it is. But as long as if you find your purpose of what you're doing it for, and your purpose is higher than yourself, then I could still be confident. And trust me, who doesn't want a doctor that's confident in their ability to do open heart surgery if you need open heart surgery? I want that doctor, right?
Confident. But not cocky, not so cocky that I can do no wrong and I know it all.
So let me ask this
again,
question.
To me, that doctor he's S hot and right, that cocky, right? So I want the confident doctor, heart surgeon that's going to do open heart surgery on me, versus the cocky doctor who can do no wrong, right? Which one do you want? Which one do you want cutting into you? You want the cocky open heart surgeon, or you want the confident one?
So if one person has a 100% success rate and the other one has a 95% success rate,
which one are they? And this is hypothetical.
You know exactly
which one of those. You're saying the cocky guy has the 100%?
Sure. What if he did?
Why?
Well, because we're making all this stuff up anyway. But what if he did? Like, right? Like, if you're like, dude, this dude's cocky as hell, but he's never been wrong. Do I want that for my daughter? I don't know. Like,
I hear you. So you're saying,
right?
You're saying see in the forest for the trees, right?
Right.
It's the type this guy or gal is an a-hole, but when you peel back that layer of the onion and look at their success rate, look at their credentials, look at their experience, if you can get through the cocky shell, this is the person you want to be working with. I hear you. Yeah, I get you.
You get my point. Like, sometimes I'm just saying sometimes,
but it's going to be a trigger for me, right? Like, it's going to be like,
sure, do I wish people weren't right? Sure, yeah. But do I I know, everybody who has a little bit of it at some point. Like, sometimes you're like, oh, okay. Like, and you deal with it in doses. Like, okay, like, yeah, like that's, I wouldn't talk like it's just how sometimes people talk too, right? And they may not be cocky, but they may just come across as that way because of a, you know, whatever. Like you and I, right? Like people could be like, well, excuse me, they put all their mind high performance and leadership stuff out there, right? And they're whatever. And that's not how it always is. Well, of course not. Like, of course it doesn't work that way. And we live in a very black, you know, we don't live in black and white world. We live in a gray world, and everything that we say isn't going to work all the single time. But right, we go off of percentages of most of the time. This is what we believe. I just feel like when we talk about ego, and obviously we've been drawn into this cocky versus confidence world, there are times when we just want people and will accept people being that way because we need them to be that way, right? We need them to push us to believe sometimes in a certain type of a thing. We want somebody to be that way where they come across that way. But it's here's the thing. We talk about transparency and we talk about sincerity, right? And I think that, and you said it, where if you're not sincere about something and you're not genuine about how you're talking and you're not transparent, then I think you can lead down to where cockiness or confidence or over, because we talk about overconfidence, or we talk about having an ego, and it becomes a negative, right? I mean, because that's what it is. If all those things are positive, like we just joked about 100%, you know, with 100% success rate of being cocky, like, dude, you wouldn't even blink twice if your daughter had to, you know, if you heard this guy is 100%, he's never been wrong before, he checks all the boxes in the world, and he's cocky as shit, you'd be like, sign my daughter up to get that thing. Like, you wouldn't even think about, because you're not thinking about them. That at that point, you don't care. You care about the skill set. You don't care about how they act, right? And I think that's my point, is that I think there are times when we accept the job of someone, and okay, that person is a jerk, but they're good at their job, right? You know what I mean? So it's
not preferred.
Correct. It's absolutely not preferred. We would love to have people who were this way, but not that way.
Yeah, it's
right?
cocky,
So,
you know, with all the other 100% pile stuff that you're giving our fictional heart surgeon.
That's right.
Yeah, his opportunity for improvement is how he or she engages with others with regard to.
But again, and I'm not picking on heart surgeons. So if any heart surgeons are listening, dude, I'm not picking on you. You may be the nicest guy in the world. I knew one of the nicest trauma surgeons ever in my entire life. He's a great friend of mine. Obi, and I will tell you, the most down to earth dude I've ever met in his life. And most surgeons, they live in a world, in a box, right? That's this big, that they place over the part that they're cutting into, and so they're different than a like a psychologist or a primary care physician, which is talking to you. And they really have to have a connection with you. Surgeons don't necessarily have to have those same connections because they're working on you in a different way. And I get that. I totally understand that. And they go, and I totally understand. Obi was a great example of someone, though, who, I mean, dude, I swear to God, man, like, still one of my best friends in the world, was like, hey, Flip, you're not doing anything. Why don't you come and be my second assist? And I did like 20 surgeries with him while we were out on, and the biggest thing, it wasn't that he let me do it. It wasn't that he was talking throughout the whole thing and he would listen to old school rock music, you know, while he was doing it. It's that he once said to me the next following day, he goes, did you go see our patient? And that he said that to me. And I just happened to be the guy around that had the time to help him the most. But that he said, did you go see our patient? First, that he was a surgeon and he was following up like that and it wasn't someone else to do it. Second, that he included me that way. I was just like, whoa. And I've called him for hundreds of things, like, Obi, dude, my kid. And you talk about an ego, zero. And by the way, could he have one? And would I expect it and be okay with it? Dude, 100%. Because he's done stuff to
confidence
save
level.
Quietly, absolutely knows he's badass, right?
Yeah.
Which is great, but down to earth enough to be like, you know what? I care about other things, and I just think, again, if he was cocky, I think I would be like, I'm okay with that because that dude would save my life if he could, right? So that's what I'm saying. When we get into these ego-driven conversations, there's an acceptance level I think everybody has. You don't just go just because you're still friends with people just because they have somewhat of an ego, and you're like, you know what, it's fine. Would we prefer different? As leaders, should we try to work on them to be more well-rounded? I think that's the point of this whole conversation is look, how do you work on those things that don't, right? So I always and will always bring up my can, right, of spam. And right, so for those of you who haven't seen before, sex, power, alcohol, money, those are the things that I think you have to be actively participating in, looking out for when you're a leader, right? If you can look at those things and you can say, look, I'm not going to, neither you or I are any prettier than we were before we got the jobs we were in. We've always been as ugly as we are, right? So it's never going to change no matter who knocks on our door and goes, man, you're so hot, right? Number one. Number two, like if power's tough because the more you get up there, the more you're like, ooh, I can do this, that, and the other. And I think to me, you lead down to your people, you serve people down, and you serve out to your customers, right? If you remember that with power, then you don't get overwhelmed, right? Alcohol is simple, right? Don't indulge on it. Even business parties are business. Treat them as such. Know your limits of what you're supposed to do. Have plans, right? Easy. And then money, right? So just stay within your realm. Just because you get more doesn't mean you have to, right? Doesn't make you any better that you have more money than other people, right? So if you think about those things with your ego, I think, and you actively, I call it active, you're actively working on them. You actively know about them and you're open about them, right? You're transparent about them. You can't go wrong. It's very hard to go wrong, when the humble don't stumble, in my opinion. So I think those things help work on your ego and make sure that it doesn't inflate, because it's going to inflate, dude. It's going to, right? You get pride in yourself and you accomplish things. There's times it should swell. Just know that there's times to hit the release valve, and that's okay. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, no, and I think we're talking a lot around just human nature, and as a leader, as with all things leadership, being aware of it and knowing that as the leader, you've got a force multiplier to those things, right? Like you say, spam, like you say, ego, right? Because the guy on the team that has the ego, his force multiplier of the impact of that versus
Negative.
The leader of the team having an ego, right? They those different roles may have the same amount of ego, but if it's within the team, it's within the team. It's within it's in its lane. But when the leader carries an ego over the team, and I'm talking negative ego stuff here, now it's got a force multiplier because it's affecting the whole team,
right?
So, and that's all things leadership, right?
And that's a great point, right? Realizing when it's okay, because it's going to be beneficial. There's going to be benefits and negatives to it. When it's a benefit that I want, because listen, so hear me out, right? This is the whole, I'm okay with cockiness. I'm okay with there's ego at some points in time when it's positive, right? I shouldn't deflate somebody because they've accomplished something and they're puffing their chest out a little bit about it. I'm okay with that. It's where then, okay, you're done, you're good. now it's affecting, now it becomes negative, right? So I think there's and the balance is how fast that happens. How far do you need to let it go? Because the positives could be, wow, other people see that and go, I want that too. That's a positive, right? Or it's a positive to see someone who maybe was down in the dumps get a win, and you're like, man, that guy got a win, and now cool, all good, right? So, and it's gonna lead into a nice thing, but it's like my daughter's team just beat a team 10-0 the other day, and they did the mercy rule at halftime, and this is in soccer, high school soccer, and the team was just, I mean, they're just not even in the same realm as my daughter's team for high school, and what I was really excited about is that after the first goal was scored in 29 seconds, the fastest I've ever seen a high school goal scored. But the parents knew what was happening, and they didn't respond with, you see sometimes when parents just go crazy, and we're going to, maybe this leads into a great thing. where you see teams that, especially younger teams, where you see like them just going, yeah, and you're like, what are you? Why?
Yeah,
Like, look
right.
what's happening, right?
Yeah,
And so that's ego of like, and it's a byproduct.
And you're saying the parents of the winning team did not do that.
No, our team did not. None of us were like, by the time, I mean, there was, this is a true statement, by the way. The 8th goal was scored because one girl on their team tried to clear the ball, kicked the goalie in the face, and it went back into the goal for an own goal. And then we were all like, this is like, I feel bad being here. Like, I shouldn't even be watching it. Like, we felt really bad, like even being in the home spot. But again, the ego is that, right? Like, you do see teams and you do see people who just, they're going to continue to cheer. And you're like, what do you want? That, it's serving no purpose for the thing, because there's not a reason for ego. So again, it's the difference of cheering for goal number 1 versus cheering for goal number 10. And
I think that still fits back to and answer the question earlier about free solo. It's Alex Honnold is the free solo guy.
Yes.
But anyways, it's again how you treat others, right? The golden rule, right? Treat others how you want to be treated. And I think that the cockiness, the bad version of the ego is when you're treating others poorly as a result. Your pridefulness is causing you to treat others poorly.
So I watched Alex Honnold's first video that he did when he did free solo, and you watch that whole thing, and he does come across as cocky about it. But what he's doing, to me,
he does? You think he does?
I think in the very beginning, when he talks about stuff and how he talks to his girlfriend, sometimes it can come across very cocky about, I'm good. There's times it does that to me, honest to God. Like, it does feels that way. However,
I didn't. Yeah, I've watched it once.
It comes across. What you find, though, is after he attempted it and pulled back the first time and waited 6 more months, and he talked to that very experienced guy who said, "Look, it's not up to the cameras. It's up to you of how you feel." I felt like he changed as a person, in a sense, and then like he gained a confidence and gained a maturity, I think, that was there. And then this is what solidified it for me. I watched a very recent one where Honnold goes with a biological explorer and scientist down to South America, and the guy had was looking for evidence that there were new species of frogs in this section of South America. I think it was in Chile, but don't quote me. And they were going to take him to the top of these plateaus that were down there. And they tried, and he did. His age was 81. The doctors were like, dude, we can't do it. So Honnold went up with 2 biologists who were also climbers, and they went all the way to the top of the thing, and they found a new tadpole that was a new species. And what I saw him doing was, I saw him giving back where his skill set was now being used for other things. It wasn't just about him, because he's also, by the way, there's another great one about another climber who died, and he beat Honnold's time without even trying. The kid didn't care about anything. And he just was like, I'm just going to go do this. And he ended up doing it in 58 minutes. And I can't remember the guy's name too, but I watched that documentary, and
dang,
that kid
said it, I could tell you. That's a great movie. Yeah.
It is, absolutely. Griffith, he's a Canadian dude.
Yeah.
And he died later on.
Oh, way to go. Spoiler alert, everyone.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Well, you'll know that from the beginning that he did it. But here's the thing. Honnold went back up as fast as he could to take his record back. So to me, that was more about, right, his ego, and he got it crushed.
Was it though? But I think that's like, hey man, I want to be the best. Like, that doesn't have to be.
You're right. I'm not saying it's not
negative.
And so what I looked at was 2 different purposes. One was doing it for pure joy of rock climbing and the pure joy of doing this stuff. And he was doing stuff that people weren't even, like, Honnold wouldn't even attempt some of the stuff that dude was doing. Like, he was doing some insane stuff where he was doing ice stuff and as well everything else. And so
awesome.
my point being,
there was the most humble kid in the world.
Oh my God. Like, wasn't even close. Where Honnold was like, he was totally giving me his props, but he definitely was like, he ain't beating me, right? So there was that little bit of, again, and it could come across as you got beat. There's your ego for it, whole thing. And then you saw Free Solo, you were like, hey, I'm going to go be the first guy to do this. That's some ego-driven things, which again, I'm okay with being that what it is. Like, that's insane of what they do. When you get nervous watching a documentary for someone, that should tell you that you're doing something pretty right. But then when I saw him do this thing for the biologist, and this was just recent, I was like, he has absolutely matured, and I watched him mature where it was right. So I think that's where I am with cocky and confidence, is of when you've grown out of it, and it's not just about you and things anymore, and you don't come across as hurting people or even semblance of hurting somebody, because you don't even know whether you're doing it or not sometimes, right? I think that's when you've changed. It's just my opinion. I just maybe it's my only child syndrome, hoping to get some backing that I've changed.
I'm so annoyed, and this is why Joe Rogan has someone do this for him. I'm trying to find a freaking
the dude.
Yeah, man.
Just go to Netflix.
The Alpinist. The Alpinist. Yeah.
It's Marc-Andre Leclerc.
Yes, Marc-Andre. Yeah.
Yes, Leclerc.
So yes, he was awesome. But like I say, I wouldn't slant Alex for wanting to get his record back. Like, that's his legacy, right? Like,
right. But Leclerc just did it to have fun.
And the part about the movie, and we'll just keep spoiling that one, that he was out there doing climbing, but this film crew was trying to make this movie, The Alpinist, right? Like they found this kid and were making a movie about him.
Right.
And they find out that he's out there doing these crazy first time ever free solo climbs and not even telling them about it. Like,
nope.
Because he didn't care. He wasn't doing it for anyone else. He was doing it for his
9
own
months.
experience.
9 months on hiatus of like, I don't want to do that. This isn't for me. Like, you just find someone that's the purist, right? Like the purist. There's another one. There's a great one too about where he British SAS guy. He wasn't
14 Peaks.
Yeah, 14 Peaks. Yeah. Great one as well, of seeing those guys that are doing it for like that.
So Nims Persia, though,
yes,
he trickles over into the cocky realm, but it's just my opinion, because he's the guy's like, I'm going to do it no matter what. He's saying it, but he's your cocky doctor. When he says it, you better believe it, because it's happening, right?
Right.
And he's so
your smile tells me though that you accept it.
I did. That's why I'm smiling, because that came back on me.
Yeah, I knew it would.
Nims Persia, I love him. Yes. Awesome movie, 14 Peaks.
Yep.
And again, but I think that's just super confidence, because if I'm sticking with my own definition of cockiness versus confidence, Nims Persia is not all about himself.
No.
Even you see that in the documentary that he's in the middle of this crazy climb, and there comes an opportunity. I think
to go help people
times to help people. And he did.
Yep.
Despite his own goals, because of his own humanity. And but he's a totally different personality than the Alpinist guy, Marc-Andre. But all in good ways. The thought I had earlier was, you said badass. I think sometimes also another way to kind of see, cockiness versus confidence and ego is, you're a badass if other people are saying you're a badass, right? So in The Alpinist, right, Alex Honnold's saying this kid is amazing, he's awesome, he's whatever. The kid didn't have to say it. Like Marc-Andre didn't have to say it. Nims Persia doesn't have to say it, right? No. He does. He'll say, "Man, I'm going to go do this, and watch out, watch me." He'll carry that swagger that you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
But you can believe it to your 100% doctor, thing. So I get you. But I think in both of those personalities, the part of the formula is they don't have to say it. The community says it about them. They don't have to say it, right? So I think my thought on that was, you're a badass when other people are saying it and you don't have to.
Right. Yeah, well, you're right.
He's the
Your
guy. That's
reputation
the guy. That's the
precedes.
gal. That's,
Correct.
like, you don't need to say it, right? Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right. And that's the thing. If you're still saying it, even though your community says it for you, and you're still being like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm a badass, then that's the toxic
Yeah.
ego or the toxic part of cockiness that's where I'm like, you need to mature past that, right?
And when
Like,
you're
you know what I mean?
saying it and you're not, and everyone else is not saying
Well, that's
it.
totally right. Then that's a completely different story, right? Yeah.
But there's you mentioned something earlier about the coins and the VFWs and all that stuff. Like, there's also there's a part of awareness as well, which is, the whole used to be's don't make no honey. Like, if you're running around still singing your praises about what you did in boot camp, man, or your service from 20 years ago, like, there's this concept that I found that and there's a book about it called The Second Mountain, but there's finding success, but growing into significance, right? Like, from success to significance. And as an example, what you said about Alex Honnold is like, sure, he's summited the mountain community in reputation and name and accomplishment, and gotten that notoriety, but he used that for in a manner of significance to go help the scientists go
Correct.
do something, right? Like, and that's success to significance.
Yeah.
And
it was his skill set that got him there. Let's be honest. Like, they could have taken anybody, but I'm sure they wanted to make like there was some press value in it. But that he said, you know what, this is cool, and that he was finding things that was things that were bigger than himself. I think that's the whole point, right? Like, again, I revert it back to, I'm okay with people and there are jobs and there are things out there that I need someone who has that cockiness, that swagger, that ego, and we even build them into the systems to make sure that they come out like that. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with it. Even when it's a little bit negative in the beginning, I'm actually okay with that. It's that you have to mature out of that to become and realize it's bigger than yourselves. Like, when we weren't at war, you had a lot of those job scopes that I would consider that way, where you didn't have it. Like, it wasn't like there was nothing backing it up except that you graduated from something. Well, yes, that's a big deal, but what are you backing it up with, right? Like, where's the beef behind it to let me know that you've gone forward from something? And maybe you and I, being on the mature end of leadership anyways, even though we're always still growing, having seen and having been in a bunch of shoes before, not all of them, we understand though that, okay, because I could start off now and still be humbled by something. Like, I apologize to my boss all the time. I screwed that one up. I should have saw that one coming, or I didn't, right? You get out of practice with leadership, you get out of practice, and your reputation doesn't precede you, or it doesn't precede you in a negative way. And then you're like, oh shit. So you have to go back and go, okay, I'm not that person anymore. How do I have to make sure that doesn't, right? And so I think that protects a legacy. It protects your confidence. It protects an ego when you go, okay, I ate my pie and I learned from it. How do I go back? And that's the senior end of it. Right now, we've been talking about the junior end of it, I think, for a long time. But I think the senior end of it is that, people still want you to be that way of confident. They want to know that they're listening to someone who isn't telling them something and with a question mark at the end of everything, like, and you should do this, right? Like, they don't want that. They want to hear, no, this is what you should do and this is why you should do it, right? And so I think that's needed, because it drives leadership, right? Being confident about something and understanding it and knowing you're that way, and if you're wrong, coming back and saying, I screwed that one up, we're going to make it better next time. That's all drives confidence, and it breeds confidence below of your teams. And I think that is a key essential thing to leading a team, is to making sure that you have confidence in what you're doing.
And as we kind of ran through those various scenarios, and again, I'm going to kind of reiterate this, we want the win-win mindset,
right?
not the win-lose, not the lose-win. And as we were kind of flowing through all that, I was thinking about like, something everyone can relate to is like sports. So, and this ego within the team. If you're a basketball team, right, we got the NBA playoffs going on, right? And you got the ego within the team versus, let's say, like a Conor McGregor or Floyd Mayweather Jr., right? The cockiness and confidence thing that we've been talking about.
Mhm.
I'd say, like, if you take a Floyd Mayweather personnel and you put him on a basketball team, right, that's a toxic environment.
Sure.
The Floyd Mayweather thing works for him again, and this is why there's a lot of hate for these types of performers that have this cockiness, right? They just generate this the other people
Conor
rooting for them to
McGregor's
lose,
perfect
right? Yeah,
example.
they're like
Right.
rooting for
Yep.
them to lose
Yep.
because and certainly a lot of people did that for show. I don't think I've seen it, but I've heard about a documentary about Bret Hart in playing that character and having and he was truly just playing it, acting it out, and catching all this hate and whatever.
Yeah.
And he didn't like it, but anyways, but do you think but again, that boxer that stands there that goes, I'm the best there's ever been. I don't care who it is. They can never beat me, whatever. To me, versus that boxer that goes, yeah, I've seen him fight. I know his style. He still can't beat me. Hey, I respect his game, but he can't beat me. And instead of like universal, like no one can beat me, the cockiness versus the confidence
So hear me out. So Mayweather and McGregor to me are very alike in the way that they promote themselves. And I think the sports that we're talking about falls into the jobs that we've talked about before, right? Rock climbing, special operations. I think you have to have that swagger to be able to do something. Okay. I think it's part of the deal, and it's accepted
that you're the best there is,
right? But it's accepted by the public that you act that way, right? Okay, now I'm going to give you a better example in my view. Take a Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury will give you not as overabundant like a Mayweather is, but he'll give you the whole "I'm going to beat his ass, dude." Like I'm just telling you, I'm going to beat his ass, right?
Yeah,
he does it. And then you come to find out that he has the interview that he has afterwards that goes, I've got all the money in the world. I've turned down people. That's not what I'm about. I'm about all these other things.
Yeah.
That to me is, I still accept Floyd Mayweather because of the flashiness, because in that environment, I'm okay with that, of him being that way, because there's a fun to it. There's the
entertainment value of it.
To it. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I love the Conor McGregor being the way that he does. Right. Most matches that I've watched Conor McGregor fight, afterwards he's given hugs and he's shaking
and
hands.
You see that's a part of the show, right?
Correct. It's 100% part
of
that way, right? Yeah. And I just recently read the article about Triple H and what he had gone through. And if you haven't read it, what he went through medically now, and he almost died. And it's really, all right. And he was the D-Generation X and Suck It and all the stuff that they used to do.
Attitude Era, man.
Right. I mean, it was the 90s, right? Woodstock. It was the years we grew up in. And so I think when you see the real human side of it all, you understand that it's a show and and you accept that portion of it because it's that, right? Whether you believe in it fully or not, right? And so, but then you hear a Tyson Fury and you say to yourself, man, like on the inside, right? Because the side of Mayweather that's still like that when the fight's done, that's not the one that I like. Like I don't need you to be like that. Like I don't. Right. Like, I don't need your picture. Like, I don't need that. But he steps in the ring. It's hard to argue that there was anybody better than him at his pound for pound in the entire lifetime of the sport. Yeah. It's hard to argue that he's not there. Right. Because of what he did. He was, and again, what you forget, and here's the sad part. What you forget is you forget that he worked just as hard, if not harder, than anybody else to get to that point. But it diminishes itself, and it wears the rock down when when the fight's over. I want you to also act a certain way of being humble and being, hey man, right? Like I want those things, from it, right? I mean, this is the consummate argument about who's, Jordan or LeBron James or Kobe, like who's your number one and why. And everybody always adds the little pieces of the puzzle as to what it is, right? And we're gonna, the end of what, next month we're doing it this month. The end of this month, man. In the
Tom
arena.
Brady.
Yeah, Tom Brady. Like I saw him. It was a very odd time for me. As soon as he went to Tampa Bay, I was able to look at him at a different level because he wasn't pummeling us.
It goes back to what you said, because you defined ego as, in comparison to others. Right. And the quote of, comparison is the thief of joy. Right. And even the argument of the LeBron, Jordan, Kobe, that's all comparison. Right. Like
correct.
They are their own entities from their own walks of life, their own circumstances, their own time frames. And this is where ego goes back to, like, comparing yourself to others. That energy is is ill spent.
Yeah. My comparison kind of world, when I think about comparing two things, I always boil the whole thing down to my two daughters and what I learned from comparing my 13-year-old to my 15-year-old. And I remember for a long time, and it's very hard as a parent not to do it, as much as it's hard as the world likes to compare Kobe to LeBron to Michael, right? That's three different eras, and literally you can make an argument that one handed the torch to the other one. Like that's almost a direct line that you could almost look at, right? And so when I look at my daughters, it wasn't until they got older where they started to form their own personalities. Even though they were growing up in the same houses, they were going through different experiences that we're realizing. And now they'd become at 13 and 15 very different people as to their success and to what they want. Now, you can say that with everybody. Like we're all grown up in different ways. You can't compare yourself to everybody else. And it's why I think you and I do what we do, where we love to push all these lessons and the applicability and the adaptability to them, because we're not telling you how to, neither you or I are saying you have to do it this way. That's not the point. Even, I mean, if Jocko, if Leif, if I don't care who, Lencioni, if Simmet, I don't care, whoever you are, we're giving recipes out, right? It's a recipe that you either follow to a T or and the truth is you shouldn't. You should be taking all these recipes, putting them together and saying, okay, how do I make my cake from what everybody's putting out?
What I've learned from what these guys have learned.
Correct. Because like Mattis had said it before, like he continuously carries a book from Marcus Aurelius. He adapts everything Marcus Aurelius has said, and he adapts it to his everyday life. He found that that's what works for him. That's great. I've read the Leadership Secrets of Marcus Aurelius, and it's hard for me to read and to put into perspective. Not all of them, but a lot of them are very different for me. That's not what works for me. I'm in a different era than Mattis was, right? And I've grown up different. I've learned different than he has. So I think, again, when we look at ego and we look at confidence and we look at cockiness, there's levels that we're accept. There's goods, bads, toxics of every single one of them. And there's like the above all, though, is that it has to be recognized and it has to be managed in some way, shape, or form, right? And I think that's
it's got to serve, like
any
level of it. Is it working or not working? Is it serving a mission? Is it helping a mission? Is it hurting a team?
Well, we talk about stress, right? And we generally tie stress to negativity, but the truth is that there's good stress. Stress makes you grow. Stress, right?
You stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think when you look at it like that and you say the doses of ego of what you have and where it is, and just knowing, because again, The hardest part is self-recognition, right? Understand where you're at, what's needed, and when it's right to move those things. So, but good.
Well, that's
good
what's cool
talk.
about having these conversations and just throwing these examples and scenarios around. Because I think one of the buckets of learnings is always how it's the alternate perspectives, or when you see maybe traits that you carry, but you don't see it until you see someone else do it, and you go, "Whoa,
I do
whoa,
that.
yeah, man, I'm sorry, all right,
Is that what I
noted,
look like?
noted. Is that what?
Is
Yeah,
that how I come
exactly.
across?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and there's that, so it's just, again, kind of comes back to, like, in the area of ego, of self-awareness and mindfulness and trying to be better, and again, the one of the tells of ego is, again, you think you got it all figured out, and that's it, you're done, I'm the best I'm going to be, or you're comparing yourself to others, or whatever, keeping score. Like, just an area that just shines to me is of a warning label of ego is when people are like, well, what kind of car do you drive? Where's your house? What neighborhood you live? Where do your kids go to school? Where did you go to school? Like, look, man, if there's, like, you're seeking to learn, but you're seeking to compare, like, hey, we're gonna, because there's that, right? There's a lot of attempts at, you see ego when people use these comparisons to justify themselves, right?
Right. Yeah.
I
And you find really quickly that those are the people that materialistically think that means something. Like, look, if you want to buy a Porsche, I don't care. Like, you want to get, like, I don't, like, that's great. All of that stuff, right? And I think we've lived in classes our whole life, and as we move up, it's a gradual. We've seen things all the time that people instantly change classes because they won they won the lottery, and all of a sudden, like, next thing you know, they're out of money and they're broke because it's not right. Like, there's habits and there's all those things that there's an acclimation, as I like to say, to all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But, like, I do it. I think about, I mean, in some respects, I think about, like, oh, well, we're driving this, and should I want something different? Should I want something better? And then, then I hear a friend who has something, and they're like, dude, I just, but you could go anywhere and see someone driving a Beamer, and guess what? You're 800,000 or you're $80,000 in debt because you're driving a Beamer, and oh, by the way, you got to go get it fixed because it's $700 to fix a headlight. You're like, wait a minute. So I've a good friend of mine, John, man, love him to death, man. He was my CAG. He goes, I never looked at what was on people's chests, because they give out that shit for whatever. And I that sticks with me when I look at materialistic things and go, you can have whatever you want, but dude, I know for a fact money and shit doesn't buy you happiness. I know that for a fact. So I think that matters to me. But so good talk today, buddy. Good talk. I like this one. This was good. We didn't get into anything else, but I didn't expect us to. So and we went down some good roads. So
I think it's a good thing to dance around, for sure.
Absolutely. So, well, listen, what do you got going on this week? Talk about what you got.
Had a great podcast drop this week with Daniel Jarvis of 22-0. One of my fast favorites around. I
still got to call him. Daniel, if you're listening, I told you I was going to call you last week, and I didn't, but I need to. I promise I will.
That was awesome. And next week I got Gareth Pickering on. Brother from another mother in the world of courage and finding, this level of humility, had a ton of financial success, but, realized that wasn't what life was all about. Now the dude lives down in, like, Guatemala on some lake in some community. Like, it's awesome, and it's a really nice. A great story. I got the for those local or want to come local, June 8th, I've got the 1-day high performance leader workshop, limited seating for most folks who might be interested. That's going to be at the end at the Chesapeake Bay Beach Club on Kent Island in Stevensville, Maryland. Excited about that. So that's the first one, post COVID, getting together, and you're going to have an accelerator. So it's stuff that I've been doing over weeks and months at a time. We're going to cram it all into one day and really get people fired up and leveled up. So I'm excited about that.
Good.
So that's it.
Good to hear. Well, listen, next week on the flip side, I am super excited. Laura Colbert will be here, author of a book and former MP and former principal and superintendent type. And we're going to talk about leading generations, which I think is absolutely 1000% valid, and how new generations aren't going to necessarily adapt. There you go. Look at you. You got yours too. I got mine. I got it over there. It's out of reach right now, but Laura would be happy that we got it. So we are reading those. So we're not going to actually talk. So next week, we're not going to talk about sirens. We're going to talk about that next month in the book review. And Laura's going to be here for that. So she's going to come back again for us. And we're actually going to have the author on the Streamcast, which is awesome. We can talk directly to her about it. But next week, we're going to talk about leading generations, because she has a very unique perspective of being a principal and kind of understanding. And actually, the first part of the book literally talks about how she is adapting her military training into working as a principal for something, which I thought was pretty great. But I don't want to give too much away, because we're just going to talk about that next week. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Otherwise, and then at the end of the month, we still have Man in the Arena. I have to catch up. I'm only 2 episodes in. So Dale and I are going to talk about Man in the Arena and really just pick out what we see with each season about leadership and what Tom had to do during those time frames. And again, I will totally have my Bills hat on for that whole time frame. It's right behind me right there for everybody that's wondering. And I should have my Lions Guide thing up next week by the time it gets here today. But listen, thanks for hanging out with us this time. We hope we didn't say shit too many times for your office. Wait, I just did it again. Oh, no big deal. But listen, love you for stopping by. Absolutely. We can't wait to see you next week. If you're listening live or you're listening later on. And as always, everybody else, flip out. Have a great weekend. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.